Turn off the transcript. I don't like that. Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for coming. We've got a big audience today, which is great. The more the merrier, I always say. And today we're going to do the fixed asset solution presentation for motive companies. And I have with me Wayne Austin. He's the sales engineer for the fixed asset solution for the SSG group for North America. Dwight Roussel, who could not make this meeting, would be the customer account executive that the partner would work with, and that would be Practical Software Solutions. So when you guys figure it all out at the very end and you figure out your license structure and the modules that you're going to need, Dwight would be the one to prepare the quote for you. And myself, I'm Brian Hamilton. I manage the channel for North America for SSG. And at this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Wayne.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's see, I've been doing lots of time zones today, so I had to kind of make sure I'm in the right one here. Let's see, before I jump in, let's make sure everyone can see. It looks like someone else is joining here. Edith, let me admit that person. All right, so Edith's been admitted. So can everyone actually see my screen? You should be able to take it full screen, so let me know if everyone is good. Okay, and Edith, you can hear us as well, right? Yeah, I just want to make sure you guys can actually hear me, so just one person respond maybe. Brian, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right, looks like we're good.
I think we just... No.
Yeah. Yes, now I can.
Yeah,
that's good. All right. So we've got a few other people that I let in, so it looks like everyone's good. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. So based on a couple of things we were just talking about, it looks like you are going to have to use the Premier version, which is the SQL Server version, so that you can have this capability.
I can't hear nothing.
Someone having trouble hearing me? I think everyone else can, right?
I can't hear nothing.
Why don't you, Lena, come in my office and go on.
All right, is she going to come to your office, Anna?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I just muted because you have to have your things on. But and Kay is coming on. She was just running a little late.
Can you hear?
All right, no worries. All right, so the reason you need to use the SQL Server version, as I was saying here, is that this is the version that's going to have both the two-way integration for sending your journal entry out to Sage 500, as well as the PO integration so that you can create assets from Sage 500. Okay. I believe you all wanted to do both tax and GAAP depreciation, correct? Anyone know the answer to that? Will you be doing tax as well as GAAP depreciation?
Yes, please.
Okay, all right. So, I think one of you have used this in the past. The current version, you can have up to a total of 20 depreciation books. I can add additional books. Of course, I can rename the state, AMT, or any of the other books that I have here. So you should be able to accommodate whatever you need from that standpoint. The other thing that using this version will give you as well, oops, let me admit this other person here, is it also supports alternate reporting periods. So if one of your entities is doing a 445 or 52, 53 week period, that's all supported, no problem. Okay. All right. So right now, what do you have everything in? Are all of the various business units doing Excel for your depreciation calculation?
Yes.
Okay. Now, are you capturing both tax and GAAP depreciation there, or are you using an outside CPA firm for tax?
Okay.
Anyone know?
What was the question?
I was asking if in your spreadsheets, do you just have GAAP depreciation, or do you also have whatever you're doing for the feds, for state?
Just GAAP, because the tax accountants, they take care of that part.
Got it. Okay, so here's something that we should talk about then, right? For the existing assets, let me actually just go into an asset detail here. For the existing assets that you have, when you do the import, If you just bring in your internal book data only, that's all you're going to have, right? So if you want to run reports for assets placed in survey earlier this year, looking at what, tax depreciation and so on, you're not going to have it, right? So what I usually recommend to folks, if you can get with your CPA firm, get them to give you an export of whatever they're doing for tax depreciation, merge that data together. So when you do your import, you can bring in the GAAP, federal, state, any other depreciation book you would be using, right? So that way, if you need to report on assets you placed in service last year, this year, whenever it may be, for tax and GAAP, you have both sets of data. Now, certainly you can opt to not do that and only capture the tax data for assets going forward. But what will happen at year end for this year, let's say if you implement it this year, you're going to have the GAAP data for the whole year, but you're only going to have tax data for the assets you add from whenever you implement this going forward. So you see where I'm going with this?
Or I can
This'll
just
give-
choose not to do tax at all, right?
You can, absolutely.
Okay.
Right. Yep. But
Okay.
now here, if you capture it, right, even though you're using an outside CPA firm, there's some cost savings in there for you because you would then be able to generate your own actual fileable 4562, send that off to them, right? Sales of property, and here I'll actually run this one because this is what's going to calculate all your federal ordinary gain losses. All right, so I'm just going to run this for last year. And you're going to have all of this ability, so you can simply run the reports and send out to them, right? Because if you look at page 2 here, all the federal ordinary gain losses, even your personal property tax report you can run and send to them. So that cuts down on billable hours that you guys have to pay, right? But it also is going to give the CPA firm exactly what they need and the way they want it. So your choice, yes, you could choose not to do it, but it's going to save you some money if you actually do capture it. So, but that's something you can decide somewhere along the line before implementation, okay? Do you know if they're doing bonus depreciation for you, or do any of you get involved in that
Yes,
side of
we
it right
get
now?
bonus.
Okay, so all of that's supported, and you're even going to have tools where you can manage that yourself, right? So if the CPA firm says, hey, we're going to do bonus this year, you can turn it off or on. If they say, hey, we're not going to do bonus this year, you can turn it off. And it even will limit you to what the IRS allows based on the place and service years. So it even has good guardrails to help, cover you on that. For GAAP, are you doing straight line mid-month,
Straight
straight line
line.
full month?
Straight line,
One.
it's kind of random. It's really bad, but yeah, we need to pick one and go with it.
Okay, so you might be doing multiple types of straight lines. So let me put it this way. How do you want it to be going forward? When you place, let's say you buy an asset, the 10th of the month, place it in service, right? If you're using the mid-month, it's going to take depreciation that month, right? If you're using full month, it's going to take depreciation that month. But let's say you turn around and you bought something on the 20th of the month. The mid-month convention is not going to start depreciating until the following month because it's after the 15th, right? Whereas full month, it doesn't care. It's still going to take it that month. So if you think about how you want it to be going forward, you can choose whichever of these straight line methods you want, full month or mid-month. Okay. And certainly for the ones you've already started depreciation, I would just continue doing it however, you were doing it already so that you're not changing the depreciation method. Now, since you all are coming out of Excel spreadsheets, here's something else that you may also want to consider. Our system is going to calculate depreciation based on that in-service date, right? The value, method, and life. But however, let's say you want to force our system to match whatever you posted as of the end of last fiscal, be it right or wrong. Hey, that's what you've posted and you're going to stick with it, right? You see the beginning date, beginning year to date, and beginning accumulated depreciation. If you have that level of detail in your spreadsheet, you can force our system to match whatever you posted as of the last period or at the end of the last fiscal year. So keep in mind you can do that as well, right? So then you don't have to worry about truing up anything at year end because it's going to all be calculated here in our system for all of 2022, but you're telling it where the starting point is regardless of that, right? Any thoughts on that? So who's the primary on the GL side? Or maybe that might require some internal discussion first. But just be aware that you can do it either way, right? Because our system will do it, or you can force it to match what you've already done as a starting point, okay? Let's see. General information fields. These fields are all customizable. Certainly, this is where you're going to capture things like your asset class, your GL account, description, location, and so on. Are you all multiple locations
Oh, yeah.
within each entity, right? Because I think you have multiple legal entities as well, right?
Yep.
Okay. So here's probably the best way to think about it, because possibly in your spreadsheet, you're not capturing that level of detail, right? But I would use multiple fields here so I can identify which department it's in, which physical location, be it a site name, building number, whatever it may be, right? And if you're multi-state, right, which you probably are, I would probably use a field for capturing what state it's in, right? Because when you do that, if you look at your main list view here, I can create groups. So if I want to just see assets at a particular site, as an example, right? I can say, okay, I want to see just assets at that location. I can create groups based on that, right? If you look at the other side of this, I want to run something like a depreciation expense report. I can run it for any of those groups I created, right? Any of those subsets, or I can run it for everything. But I can say, hey, you know what? I want to sort and subtotal by, location, let's say, right? With subtotals, and maybe below that by class or GL asset account, right? So if you're capturing the information, it can, really greatly influence what your reports look like. Let me go back into one of these here. So I can sort and subtotal by these. I can search based on these, and I can create, groups based on these. Okay. So that's going to be important to you on the back end. Let's look here for a second. If you go into customize a field, this is where you can see you can rename these fields anything you want to. So if you look at what I have here, that's not necessarily what you would use, right? But you can change the display name. See my custom field 7, I changed it business center. That's what's going to actually show up there. So you can rename them anything you want, okay? GL account numbers, by the way, will take up to 100 characters. So, and that field, right, you can use whatever number scheme you want to. You can also create smart lists like this so that you can restrict entry so that anyone adding a new asset, for example, it'll only accept a valid GL account number that's in that list, okay? Talk to me about disposals and transfers. Those are going to get captured on your transactions tabs. Do you typically do any transfers of assets between entities or between cost centers, anything like that?
Not too much, but we do sell off fixed assets. We have
Okay.
fleets.
We transfer vehicles sometimes.
Oh, yeah,
And
something.
it might, okay, well, yeah. Because this is
All
not
right.
lease accounting. Okay, yeah. We do
So-
transfer vehicles.
Got it. So when you do a transfer in our system here, right, it's going to be a true transfer. So it's not going to be, hey, I'm changing the location and changing the GL account. You can certainly do that, but if you do it as a transfer, right, here's the benefit to that. And auditors are actually going to love you for this. So when you do a transfer, it doesn't have to be current date. I can transfer within the current company. I can transfer between legal entities as well, right? Now, let's say I'm transferring within the same company. You can set which primary field you want to update it, be it the department, whatever it may be, right? So you'll see here, that field will get updated when I transfer it. But I can also say yes here to edit general information fields. And that way, right, I can change anything else, GL account, any other field, location related as part of the transfer. And what's going to happen when you do it that way, right? It is going to stop depreciating at whatever the current accumulated depreciation is at this location, starts depreciating on the new cost center at whatever the accumulated depreciation is. Because one of the things you're going to probably need to be able to prove, let's say it's a 5-year asset, 30,000, I transfer it at the 3-year point, it's got 20,000 fully depreciated, another 10K to go. Auditors might want to say, hey, I want to see that this thing is really going to depreciate that remaining 10 grand like it should. And with the transfer report, you'll be able to prove that, right? So doing it as a transfer is definitely better. If you're going between companies, like you're sending a vehicle from one company to the next, right? I can easily do that as well, right? So if you look at this, when you do it as a transfer, one of the other options you're going to have is you can transfer as a disposal. So it looks like you're selling it, right, to the other company. So you can use, fair market value, current net book value, whatever you want to. It's going to show up as a disposal by sale and the company it's leaving, right? So you don't have to go that far, but depending on what your accounting practices are, that's something that you may need to be able to do. It gives you the flexibility of doing it either way, okay? For disposals, you can do full or partial disposals, right? So let's say I want to do a disposal of this asset here. I'll actually go ahead and dispose this. Let's say I'm going to do abandonment since it's fully depreciated, right? So my net book value is 0 across the board here. And then I'm not going to throw in any cash proceeds or anything like that. Let's go ahead and say OK. So now you can see my transactions tab is populated. It's shown I've done a full disposal by abandonment, right? No cash, no non-cash, no expensive sale. When you go to the main asset detail, if you do a full disposal, you'll see all the depreciation books will be grayed out, right? And keep in mind, by the way, in my books here, you see I've got EU and EU tax. I was on an international demo earlier, right? So you can rename these books as I mentioned. So certainly for you, you might name one of these property tax, or you might be doing ADS or something like that. So you can rename the books. Now, if you go to the asset history, right, it's going to capture everything from asset creation through disposal. So it's got a really good audit trail. It's going to show the asset was disposed, but note that it will show the date done on the system separate from the actual gain loss calculation or disposal date. So in other words, if the GL team sends you an email, hey, we disposed of these 10 computers last month, right? Here's the info on them. You can come in here today and backdate that disposal to last month or future data to next month. These two don't have to be the same dates, right? And it's also going to capture who did it. Now, let's say you made a mistake, right? Someone sent you the wrong info. You can just go back to the transactions tab, right? Delete last transaction. And the transaction is gone. Everything goes back to the way it was, right? Including your accumulated depreciation and so on, back to wherever it should be. And then, of course, the asset history. That does not erase that disposal. It just creates a new entry. The last transactions was deleted, when it was done, and who did it. And this data, by the way, stays here unless you manually purge it or set it to auto purge after X number of days. So you can always see what had been going on with the asset. And you can limit who can do disposals, transfers, reverse transactions, all of those kind of things. Okay. So for a partial disposal now, what's the circumstance that you typically need to do partial disposals?
We don't usually do partial disposals.
Okay, so right now in your spreadsheet, you have every asset at its own individual line items, or do you have some things grouped together? 10 computers, something like that, some pieces of equipment?
I think we moved them all out separately, and we don't even capitalize computers anymore because they're not high enough for us to do that.
Okay, so you've got a threshold of like $3,000, $5,000, something like that?
$5,000, I think.
Okay. Now, is anyone capturing the details about those expensed assets, right, that you're not capitalizing?
No, that we are not. I would think the IT is supposed to do that, but I don't think they have a very good trail.
And do you have a way of reporting on that spend? So let's say you spent 20 grand on computers this way. How do you account for that now?
We don't spend 20 grand on computers. Then we would probably capitalize if it's an expense, or at least spread out the expense.
Got it.
We just don't. We're in a situation where, it might be like a new employee gets one, and if it's, if we're adding bodies, but yeah, you will see computers on our fixed assets.
All right, got it. So, but just want to show you options, right? So if I'm adding a whatever it is, right, that's below that $5,000 threshold, but I want to be able to look at an additions report to see what did I spend year to date on that stuff or on everything total. I can put those in here with do not depreciate as a depreciation methods, right? So those are, I'm treating them as expensed assets, right? So if I go into this one here, for example, I can capture all the details, right? What it is, where it is, who has it, right? When I got it, when I placed it in service, and what it cost. But by using do not depreciate, it's not going to show up on my depreciation expense report, and I have all the details and I can report on it. So that's an option for you. And certainly if you're buying a large amount of things, you know, under IRS rules for GAAP, you can certainly bundle them together so that they're above the threshold and, you know, depreciate them then, right? Capitalize. So you have the flexibility of doing both ways, and that's what I wanted to show you there. Okay. Anybody have a question about that? All right. Let's ask about period closes here. So certainly, you know, it's not something you can do in Excel, but in the system here, you have the ability to come in, close a period, end of the, you can do it monthly if you want to, you can do it end of the fiscal year. And what that does is basically just kind of lock the books, right? So that if you had a need to come in here and change something that impacts depreciation, value, methods, or lives, you can actually do that, right? Because our system really handles midlife changes pretty easily, be it value, method, or life. And actually, when making changes like that, you even have options of when you want to make it effective. So if I have some piece of equipment that I started depreciating, you know, somewhere in the past here, I'll just grab this one, placed in service in 2020, and let's say I upgraded this piece of equipment and I need to change its value, let's say, right? So let's say I want to make this 32,000 instead of 29,000, right? When making any of those kind of changes, it's going to tell you, hey, you're making a critical depreciation change. How do you want to handle it? So you'll have the choice of going back to the placed in service date, right? Which is going to wipe out all the depreciation calculated so far, recalculate back to that in service date. But now, if you've been doing monthly journal entries, those are going to be all wrong, right? Because you've changed something here that's going to impact the past. If you set the period close, right, that would become the go back to option. You can go back to the period close and not go beyond that. But certainly you also have this option if you don't want to change the past and have to redo an adjustment on the Sage 500 side for the GL. If you use the current through date, what's going to happen is it's going to capture your current depreciation through date, right? I'm going to go ahead and select that. And whatever the beginning year to date and accumulated depreciation is as of that date. So now it is not going to change the past, right? So if I make a change like that as of current through date, next time I run depreciation, run my journal entry, right, it's going to be based on the new value and the calculations going forward. And I didn't have to do an adjustment in my accounting side. So you can do that as an option, right? Anyone have a question about that? Okay. And by the way, changes like these are captured in detail on the history, because if you look at this here, you're only seeing the last set of numbers, whatever the value is I have here, anything I may have changed that impacted this, right? So if you want to see the history, you can always go back and look at, hey, what did I do on this date? An adjustment was done, which book, right? How much did you change the value from and to, or if it's estimated life or the depreciation method, all gets captured here, right? As of what date and what was the beginning accumulated depreciation year to date. So you get full tracking of all of those financial changes. Any questions about that? Okay. All right. You can also link images, by the way, invoices. So basically, if you can scan it or take a picture of it, you can link it in here, PDF, JPEGs, bitmap, and so on. So that's certain something you can always take advantage of if you need to. Now, for adding assets in the system, of course, you can manually add things here, right? I can simply go to add an asset, you know, and once I've customized these fields, sure, I can point and click and populate things pretty easily. But I can also set up templates so I don't have to do any of this manual, right? So you can create templates for certain types of assets, machine and equipment, furniture and fixtures, whatever you want to. And in your template, you can include things like the IRS property type, depreciation methods, and lives. So that way, if you've got to add something new, right, instead of having to manually type it in, I can simply come in here and, you know, choose, hey, I've got to add some new furniture and fixtures. And here's my template. In my template, I'm including just a generic description, the correct GL account info, right? Department, asset class. But if you notice, I'm also including the IRS property type, depreciation methods and lives for all my depreciation books. So literally all I'd have to do, choose my template, give it an acquisition date, in-service date, and value, and I can push it across all the other books, right? Hit apply book defaults, and I'm done. So it makes it pretty easy. It also has a replication function, right? So if I've got, 20 of something I want to add, all right, I can do the first one and save it, and I can just hit replicate and say, hey, make me, 19 copies of it. So you can do that if you're adding assets from this side. Now, certainly in your world here, you're probably going to be doing it using the PO integration. Now, I don't know Sage 500, but I'm just going to go into the links guide here so you can see what that looks like, because it'll have some screenshots. Let's see, here you go. So if I go make this bigger here, this actually will walk you through step by step how to configure the integration, right? And how to actually go through the process of creating assets while you're doing that purchase order or accounts payable transaction. Okay, so it'll actually walk you through all of that. So you all will have all of this documentation, because my guess is that is probably how you're going to do your additions, right, coming out of Sage 500. Any questions about that? Okay, and then the same will be true for your journal entry, right? There's actually a Sage 500 link. So if I were, let me go ahead and actually run depreciation here and get everything back to end of August. Are you going to be doing your journal entry monthly?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so I just went ahead and ran depreciation for end of August, and let me just jump in one of these, fact check myself here. Let's find something that's actually depreciating. Here we go, right? So you'll see my current depreciation through date across all my books is 8/31. So once I've done that, right, yes, you can run the general ledger posting report if you need to send this to someone, right? Because all the reports are exportable. So in your case, you won't need to run this, but I just want to show you what the report looks like, right? So you can run this. All the reports here are exportable to Crystal Reports, PDF, CSV, Excel. So you have lots of export options, right? But for you to get this over to Sage 500, you're going to set this link as your favorite. So all you would be doing is actually clicking on the link. It's going to have you close the company. And since you have multiple companies, if you run depreciation for all of those entities, right, you can choose, okay, which company you want, right? It usually will default to active assets, but you could certainly choose other. And then what's your posting period? So in my case, I just ran depreciation for 8/31. So let's do that, right? If you need to add, you need to add, a reference number or whatever it might be, and preview, right? And it's going to show you that same report I just showed you in an XML file, right? And post, and it's going to send it over to Sage 500. In my case, I don't have Sage 500. So you would do that for the first company, right? And then go on to your, other companies. Okay.
Would it actually post, or would it just go put it in a journal entry in a batch, and then we can go look at it before it posts?
Yeah, I was gonna. I think it's a pending batch. I remember from when I was using it. I'm sure the guide would show you, but I can't imagine that it would be posted. That would be against everything I've seen Sage interact with.
I would think that it is going to have you review it, right? Because typically most people are going to want to do that. Let me look, checking digital numbers, journal entry. Here we go, right? So I believe you're going to have to review it and then post it. Now for Intact, it's different because this integrates with Intact also, right? So in Intact, in the configuration setting inside of Intact, you have a choice of it posting as a draft that you can review and then post, or you can have it go straight to draft, but it's controlled by Intact. I just don't know if Sage 500 gives you those same choices. So
I can tell by the guide it's going to be a pending entry, so that's the preference, I would think.
Okay, good. All right. Oh, here you go. Matter of fact, here you go, because right here you've got to verify it. So it is going to be a pending. Yep.
But what if we don't agree with the journal entry? Do you fix it? How do they integrate? Like, if I change the journal entry, what's going to happen to my interface?
So if you look at it here and say, hey, this doesn't look right, clearly, what you're going to need to do is go back into the fixed asset side and fix whatever is wrong and rerun that posting.
And then will it just override the pending transaction or make a new batch?
It's going to probably name it, it'll have a different date timestamp, but I would imagine it's probably going to post it as another one and you can delete the previous one.
Okay.
So, I can verify that. I know that I recall doing that several times. You have to just delete the batch and then make your corrections and run it again.
Yeah. I think we get to see the journal entry before we even go and say post it. So you would think you would catch it before you even send it over.
Yeah. Because remember, when you run it here, right, before you send it over, it shows you a preview of it. So you will be able to see, hey, this looks wrong. Yeah. So you can see this before you hit post. Because remember, it does have you preview it here first before you post it, and it sends it over. And then if you missed it there, when you are reviewing it in Sage 500, that's your second chance at reviewing it to catch something if it doesn't look right. Okay. All right. If anything comes up where you need to, tax rule change, something like that, you need to change depreciation methods and lives at the same time. There's a bulk edit tool, right? So you can actually do that as well. So I can choose, any group of assets, make changes to multiple books at the same time, right? I can change both depreciation method from anything to something else. So like in the case of the CARES Act, right? You could change all of those assets to straight line half year and all of those 39-year lives, right? You can now do at 15 years, right? But it'll also give you those choices. Hey, do you want to change the past, go to the place and service date, or do you want to go from the current depreciation through date going forward? Okay. So it'll give you those kind of flexibility as well.
Can I ask a question? What about fixed assets where the vendor did not charge us sales tax and we have to file use tax? Is there anything here where you can add sales tax to your asset or flag it that you need to file use tax on it?
Now, I'm trying to think of how people typically do that. When you do that, right? So this is basically an additional cost coming in later. So you have a choice of increasing the value, right, to reflect that additional cost of what it should be depreciating at. The other side of that, right, is you can use one of the other books and say, hey, this is just whatever I need to file separate from the acquisition value for whatever that tax amount is. So you could populate it there and run reports based on that so you know how much you need to pay. But this does not calculate sales and use tax, though.
Okay, or flag an asset that you have to file use tax on it. It's just when we're being audited, it would be very convenient for us to already know, like, okay, yeah, this one didn't charge us, so we actually filed the use tax and what quarter it was filed in. Just something, if there was a tab available or some way for us to track the asset other than going to pool.
You know what I would do then? Remember, you can rename these fields anything you want to, right? So I would use one of these fields for capturing that, right? So I would simply go in here. Here, I'll just rename this. And what would you call it? You said sales tax or use tax?
Yeah, you called it use tax. And then we could probably then run a report on things on a quarterly basis of what we have to file use tax for. Yeah, that would work. Okay.
Right. And then you can simply.
That works.
Right. And then you could make this a yes, no field, right? Or just leave it blank if it's not required, but you can simply make it a yes if it is required. And then what I would do is create a group based on this, right? And actually, let me show you this. You can just see the mechanics of it, right? All right, I'm just going to make a group named use tax, and I'm going to tell it to look specifically at that field, right? And so if that field is yes, right? Everything that I flagged that use tax is required will show up in that group. So now if I go to that group that I just created, there it is, right? So every asset that you add that you need to do use tax on, if you just make it part of your workflow that you flag it here, it's going to show up in that group. And then, of course, you can report on that group separately, just the asset you need to do use tax on.
Yeah, that's nice. Okay.
Yep. So, yep, good call there. All right, let's see. Any other functionality type of thing from this side that you need to see before I jump into the reports? So let's talk about some of the things you're going to need, right? We talked about disposals, full and partial. And by the way, I can run reports from back there, but I can get to all my reports from here as well. So if I just want to run, disposal report, let's say what's, I've disposed of so far year to date, I can run it for whichever books. I can run it for any date range I want. It is not depreciation date dependent, right? And I can sort and subtotal this however I want to as well. But this is what's going to capture both full and partial disposals, net proceeds, realized gain losses, all of that type of information. And if you have, real property that you're disposing of, for example, things like that are going to show up as 1250 property on your sales or property report for tax. But this is just your standard disposal report. System numbers automatically assigned by the software. If you've got asset tags, right, that's a user-defined field, so you can capture that as well. It'll show what it is, your in-service date and disposal date, but under acquired value, if it's a full disposal, it's going to be the full acquisition value. If it's a partial disposal, whatever that disposal amount is, but it will capture the accumulated depreciation, your net proceeds, realized gain losses. And while doing a disposal, by the way, you can opt to defer recognizing it or not recognize it at all. So you've got all of those kind of options. And as I mentioned, you can sort this any way you want to. So does this look like everything you would need for a disposal report?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, what about serial number? Can you add a I saw serial number somewhere, so you can probably put that in your reports, right?
Yeah, that's one of the fields that I actually renamed. Let me go in here and see. So here's just one of the fields, right? So if you've got serialized assets, that's definitely a good idea, right? So there is a field for that, but I could remember rename any of these fields anything I want to, right? So you can capture whatever type of information. And this is searchable, by the way. So if you want to find a particular piece of equipment by serial number, right, from the search here, I can search based on any of those general information fields. I can simply come in here. If I know the full serial number, right, I can be specific and say, hey, that exact serial number. But if I don't know the full serial number, right, I can certainly come in here and say, hey, it contains, 1, 2, something. I'm just going to do that and see a bunch of things came back because I only put 2 characters, right? But if I look at any of these, it's going to have a 1 and a 2 in that serial number. And by the way, vehicles, right? You might want to use a field for capturing VIN numbers, things like that, so you can rename these accordingly, and then you can easily find that vehicle you're going to get rid of, by the VIN number, right? And remember, you can link images and invoices here. So if I, for example, replace some component on that vehicle, I've got a warranty, I can link that warranty PDF in here as well. So, okay.
So does each company have their own, they can customize it by company, or is it, like if we customize?
Yeah, so if I'm not sure how many companies you have, but let's say I want all the companies, these general information fields to be laid out the same way, right? But obviously they're going to have different GL account numbers, right? I can copy the custom field settings from one company to the next, so I don't have to go into a dozen companies and do that. If you go to copy setup, right, I can copy the settings from one company. Let's say I want to get all the custom fields and all the custom reports, right, and copy them to all the companies. Sure, I could do that. The smart list, right, I may not copy because if I set up my GL accounts in a smart list, I certainly wouldn't want these GL account numbers showing up in a different company, right? You're using a different GL account number scheme for each entity?
No, it's the same scheme, but they're different. We're all
numbers.
Numbers.
Well, they would, we have different company numbers, so I'm not really, like usually
okay.
We have like 01 for one company, 02 for another company.
Got you. Okay. Yeah, so you can absolutely copy the settings, right? And then with each company, set the appropriate GL account numbers you need to show up in that list. Okay. Personal property taxes. Do you all deal with that, or is your outside CPA firm doing that?
We do.
Okay. So here's a case where groups are going to come in handy, because you're probably going to want to create a group, right, based on where the assets are that are in a particular property tax jurisdiction. And you'll probably want to use a field to identify the property tax category, because when you do that, it's actually going to sort it by property tax category and acquisition year end for that specific subset of assets in a particular property tax jurisdiction. And the same thing here could apply, because you don't have property tax liability for all the assets. So just like I did with the use tax thing, you could use another field, right, for identifying assets that you have property tax liability for. So only those show up in here. And so you can do something like this pretty easily. Okay. So would that be helpful for you?
Yes, very much.
Because see, if you once you have it set up, it's literally a couple of clicks and you have this, as opposed to trying to figure it out in an Excel file. Let's see. You probably need some type of roll forward report too, but let me run the standard depreciation expense report. And I'm just going to run everything for the internal book, in a sense that's where you all live primarily. And I'm just going to run it unsorted, but remember, you can sort and subtotal this up to 3 layers deep. By, literally anything you want to. So you can do it by location and class and, GL asset account, let's say, right? So you can really slice and dice this however you want. But I want you to just take a look at the main columns here, right? What's getting captured. It does look at prior through date, current through dates for your depreciation. This one calculation in my case is looking at 1 month, right? And of course, this is all exportable. You can also add and remove columns of data to make this report really include or exclude whatever information you want to. So does this one look like something you would need pretty standard? Okay. And by the way, right, remember, you can change how it's sorted here, and here's where click Customize Reports. You can add or remove columns of data, and all of these variants, right, you can save as a custom version of the report. So if you look at my reports list here, the original one you see at the top is a standard version. All of these you see with a yellow book symbol, I changed something, right? So like this one, for example, I have it sorted by location with subtotals, right? This one, I didn't change anything here, but I went in here and I added current net book value. Since it's a numeric field, have it give me a summation at the end. I can change the orientation. I can change header and footer. But you can add and remove lots of information, both calculated and static data. You can, make these reports exactly what you want. Just remember, when you create a custom version, hit Save As. I would append to the name something intuitive that you can tell what's different in that version, because not only will you have access to this, right? Everyone else can have access to these custom reports as well. So that way you can, share. If you find a nice layout of a report that works, you think would work for everyone else can get access to it. And then rather than having to dig through the 30 standard reports plus any custom ones, you can just right click add to favorites, and you can just work off your favorite tabs with your short list of reports that you like to run. Okay. Here is another one that you will probably like. This is a fixed asset summary report. So a lot of people use this for a roll forward type report, because it's going to have your beginning cost, ending cost, as well as the prior accumulated and total accumulated all on one report. But it's also going to look at additions year to date, transfers and disposals year to date as well, all on one report. And you can further tweak it if you like. But most people usually like this one for year end. I think they give this to auditors, I'm not sure, but take a look at the columns of data here. That wouldn't be helpful. And remember, export options, right? Got lots of export options. Okay. Is there any particular report? Because I want to make sure I show you, whatever reports you're going to need.
That you were going to show us all forward?
That's the one I just ran, that fixed asset summary, right? That's the one I just ran just now.
So, sorry. I was just looking for something that ties to the balance sheet. So this will always tie to the balance sheet.
Right, because this is also depreciation date dependent, right? So whatever up through current point you're depreciated through will show up there, including your additions, disposals. And there's a more simplified version. So if you prefer, let me actually run this one. If you prefer something like this, right, broken down by account number, which is how this one runs, it doesn't have as much information, right? But a lot of people also use this one as well. And you can tweak either versions, to be exactly the way you want. If you want a hybrid in between the two, you can certainly do that. But see, this one is much more simplified just by account number, right? But it does not have the prior accumulated and total accumulated depreciation, but it has the rest of the info, right? So you've got this one as well.
Can you customize the report to show everything?
You can add and remove columns, right? So if you prefer the other one, which already has more data, you can start with that and you can add or remove lots of information.
Because what we have to turn in is all fixed assets is one big grand summary per company and show that our accumulated depreciate, that everything ties out. So I'm just kind of looking for, it sounds like it's here. It just it doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, like a map, it rolls, they're big monster workbooks that we have. And I'm just trying to see the equivalent to the one that has grand totals and shows that everything's in balance.
And do you need those grand totals, sorted out in some way, let's say by class or something like that?
By GL.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Car, leasehold improvements, rental fleet, but big categories, and then just a summation of everything.
Here. And you don't need the individual details, you just want the subtotals, right?
Yes, by category.
All right, so do you want to buy class first, then buy GL account?
Sure.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm just trying to see which way is going to be easier. All right, so we'll do class, and then below that, that was the GL asset account you wanted to use, right?
Sure.
And like I said, you can add and remove columns of data, but I just want you to see the format of the layout, right? And you can run this for all the assets in the company, or you can run this for, just a subset. Now, if you also need to do things like this, let's say you need a year-end, this same report for every company, right? I'm going to show you how you can do that, because while I'm in this, I can only see what's in this entity. And they're not disregarded entity, right? They're all separate companies that you're doing separate tax filings for, correct?
I believe so, but I think there's probably value to pay to
no,
be
it's all, they all have tax filings.
All right, so separate 4562. So here you go. Here's this one, right? So I'm in this company and I created this one that's sorted, in this way, right? So I could run this for each company, right? And it's going to be broken down by class, then GL asset account. And if you notice, I don't see any individual asset details because I told it to run in subtotals only, right? So I'm just looking at the summary format, not the individual asset details. So you could do something like this. And at the very end, right, it's going to have your grand totals for everything, and you can hand the auditor something like this. Now, most auditors are pretty familiar with our system, so odds are when you say, hey, we're using Sage Fixed Assets, they're going to tell you what report they want and how they want it. So you could easily do that. Now, what I wanted to show you was this. Since you have multiple companies and you have multiple reports you're going to want to run from these companies, right? Within each company, I can set up a batch. So that's first level. Let's just show you that first. So I can tell it which reports I want to run, and this could be standard reports or custom versions of the reports. When I run the batch, right, I can send it to a printer, out to a folder in PDF, Crystal Reports, or Excel. There's also a global task manager. So this is what you'll want to use for your multiple companies. And especially if, let's say, you want to really make year end much easier, because you can come in here, choose which companies you want to run. So I've got 6 companies selected here, and under select events, I can tell it, hey, I want to run depreciation end of the last fiscal, end of the current fiscal. So my depreciation list run totals is looking at the full fiscal year, but you can certainly be looking at any period you want to, which reports you want to run, right? Okay. And now when I run this, it's going to go out to all 6 of these companies. It's going to run depreciation for that date range. So I'm looking at the full fiscal year and run each of these reports, right? So now I didn't have to go into each company and tell it to run depreciation. I click that once, and it's going to go out and do all of those things, and I can push it out to a folder or out to an Excel file or PDF, right? So that might be something that's handy for your end. Okay. All right. Any other report or functionality that's important to you that I've not touched on here? All right, so question for you. It sounds like you don't need to do the CIP side of things. You've got a solution for that, right? But I think you just wanted to find out about being able to, barcode everything, which it sounds like you do, right? So let me move this over here. This is where you're going to be able to, have whatever asset tag numbers you want to use. The barcode is generated from that. So when someone is doing a physical inventory, scan the barcode. That's how it knows which specific assets you're looking at. And if you look at this side of it, you'll be able to use either an Android app or a handheld scanner, right? Where the users that are using the tracking software will be able to push out an inventory list out to multiple people, right? Those users can then go off-site, scan the barcode, update anything that's changed, where it is, who has it, whatever the case may be, right? And they can even take a picture of the asset if they want to, send that data back to the person using the tracking software. The users using the scanner or Android app do not need a license, but the folks that are using the tracking software, well, the tracking software uses the same database as depreciation. However, these users will not have access to any book depreciation fields. So if I go into, let me just open up a company here. Here, I'll go into this one. So if you go into a company here, right, and you go and look at, any of these assets in here, they have no access to the depreciation fields, right? So they can update general information fields, but it's the users that are using this module. They'll need a license. The people using the scanners or the Android app do not need a license. And the person that's doing this is really in control of everything, right? Because they're the ones that's going to push that inventory list out of whatever group of assets where the others can go and scan it, right? And do anything that's needed. And actually, the outcome for you, right, on the accounting side is you need to be able to see what's missing, your ghost assets, right? Because right now, for example, with the IT assets, you're not 100% sure of what you actually have, right? So let me actually show you the reconciliation report from the last inventory I did in this. Because this report, once they've completed the inventory, is what's going to identify those ghost assets. So if you take a look at this, right, assets not found, it's going to give you the tag number and what it is. Status of N are the ones not found. Status of O are the ones that are found with no changes. Anything they made a change to. Status of C, you don't really care about those. Those don't cost you money. These cost you money. It's missing, right? And since you're a for-profit company, it means you're paying property taxes and insurance premiums for these MIA assets, and you're certainly not going to budget for replacing things you don't even know are missing, right? So that's what's important to you all out of this. Now, are any of you on the call the ones that would actually be working with doing the physical inventory side of things, or all of you are just on the accounting team here?
We don't do a physical of any of our assets. Except for
you're not doing
ever. We don't do not fixed assets. Obviously, inventory, yes, but not fixed assets.
Okay. So is this something you're going to start doing or not a need right now? Okay. All right. No worries. So then looks like
from being able to do this.
Nobody's pressuring you yet, but that may come up later. So you can always reach out to Brian or Dwight and say, hey, look, auditors are saying we need to start, doing physical inventories of a fixed asset. Can we see that tracking module again? I'll be happy to show it to you. So you can actually add it later. Does anyone have any questions about anything at all then? Right? Does it look like this will work for you?
It does. I think we love it. I need to jump off.
It reminds me of B&A, which I used to use for when I was in another life. So it should be pretty easy.
Yeah, it is actually easier to use. So, Anna, sorry.
Do we need to buy a separate license or just
yes
license? Okay, so it's a certain number of licenses to use this. Okay.
Or
right.
We have to buy the module, correct?
Well, yeah.
It's a subscription model, right? So it's a named user license. So if you need, 5 people that need to be able to use it, you need to get 5 licenses. Right. And the license comes in 1, 3, 5, 7, 10, and then increments of 5. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah. Once you figure out the license count that you're going to need, let me know that. I'll get that over to Dwight so we can get a quote out to you.
Probably should price 10.
10 is what you're going to need, at least a quote on.
Yeah, and then I need included in that the link if it's not bundled with it.
Okay.
And isn't your year end coming up?
It is. That was my next question.
We're looking for a year end special, please.
Yeah, we do have some year end incentives.
I thought you were going to say you're going to congratulate us and buy even more so we make our numbers this month.
I'll plan away.
I got it all wrong.
Yeah, we do have some year-end incentives that will definitely add to your quote. So if you're looking to make a move, if this was going to be a move you're going to make in 3 or 4 weeks, it would be more than advantageous for you to do it if you could within the next 2.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Year-end's always a good time to hit you up. I know.
Absolutely. Okay.
Boy, Julie knows all the secrets.
And what modules were the quotes going to be for?
I think they just wanted depreciation right now. They did not need the CIP module because they have a tool for that, and they're not doing physical inventories now. So it looks like depreciation only, premier depreciation.
Okay.
Because they need the integration.
Got it. Okay. And Julie, should this quote go to you?
Yeah, send it over to me, and we'll regroup internally. And it's been a great presentation. Thank you very much.
Definitely, and I'll get the recording out to you as soon as it's published.
Sounds good.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much, and Wayne, thank you.
My pleasure. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.